get back to basics so that people could see, can I go through my configuration and make sure that at least I've covered off some of the basics, and I'm confident that data coming into my analytics is clean. So we've got a fair bit to cover over the next half hour, 45 minutes, so I'm going to jump right in. As Ken said, if you have any questions, just throw them into the questions pane, and we will have some time at the end for a question period. So what we're going to cover, I'm going to give a brief overview of Google Analytics. Then we're going to go through some of the best practice implementation steps. Now, for some people, these may be slightly different, but as a general guideline, it'll work very well for you. And then as we go through, I'll identify some common problems that tend to come up. So for those of you, I expect a lot of you are familiar with Google Analytics. For those of you that are not very familiar, it's a free enterprise-level analytics tool. And it's evolved from a piece of software called Urchin, whom Google acquired in March 2005, after which they then launched a Google Analytics 101 version 1 in November 2005, and that since has been consistently updated and rapidly evolving on an ongoing basis. These slides will be available for you after the presentation, and I've got some links in here. So the link right here, as an example, goes to some of the history of Google Analytics and all their various releases that they've launched since they came out with version 1. How does it work? Well, basically, when you browse a website in your web browser, the Google Analytics tracking code that's identified with the GATC fires off a call to the Google Analytics server, which records a log file. And on a regular basis, the Google servers then process those log files into a report database that is then pulled and available for you in your Google Analytics report. I see that some people are having trouble hearing. Is the audio okay for everybody? I'll try turning it up a notch. Is that a little better? Okay, you can post if you're still having trouble. Great, thank you. So, getting down to the main portion of our presentation today is our implementation checklist. So this is a quick overview of some of the steps that we go through. As I mentioned, some of these the order that you do these may change slightly, but you start with wanting to understand the website, moving to analyzing the actual site itself. You want to create your account, or at least your Google Analytics account if you already have a Google account. Create and configure your profiles, set up your internal filter, traffic filter, to block out your office traffic if you'd like. You then add the tracking code to your website. You'll want to link Google Analytics and AdWords together if you're running some AdWords campaigns. Related to this, if you're running AdSense campaigns, you'd also want to link that. You'll set up goals and filters, configure your e-commerce tracking, configure site search, both of those if you have that on your website. We want to talk about some campaign tracking. One thing a lot of people don't know about is the privacy policy. As part of Google's terms and conditions, you do need to have a privacy policy, and we'll talk about that briefly then too. You then want to test your implementation if possible on your development or staging server, set up your remaining filters, and then move the code to your production site. And then on an ongoing basis, you should be reviewing your analytics, maybe making tweaks based on requirements. You want to grant access to other users, and we always recommend for some key stakeholders setting up scheduled reports. Helps ensure that they keep coming back to the site. So we're going to jump through each of these steps, and we'll get started right here. So understanding the website. You want to look at understanding what are the goals and objectives of the business or the company as a whole that you're implementing the analytics for, as well as the website. So you want to talk to as many stakeholders as possible. Why does the website exist? What do you want your visitors to do? What are the site's primary objectives or secondary objectives? So you may have an e-commerce site that has a primary objective of wanting people to purchase your product. So checkout, completing your checkout. As a secondary objective, maybe you also have a newsletter, and getting people to sign up for your newsletter and engage a little more with your brand could be considered a secondary objective. If you can't answer these questions, then you really need to take a step back, talk to a few more people. It's really important to understand what are the goals and objectives of your site before you go and start implementing Google Analytics, because it can really help guide where you're going and what you're going to do. Step 2, you want to analyze the website itself. So does it have a large amount of traffic? Now, since maybe you don't have any analytics yet, that may be hard to understand. But you could talk to some of your IT folks if you have some. If you're the one and only person, take a look at your log files. Are they extremely large? That might indicate a large amount of traffic. Do you have multiple domains or subdomains? If you do, there's special considerations to look at here. Do you have non-HTML pages you want to track, such as PDF or other downloads such as Word documents? Do you have dynamically created pages? So are the pages PHP or something like that? If they are, hopefully you can use an Exclude file that can help you deploy the Google Analytics across your site all in one blow. It makes life a lot easier to deploy Google Analytics and make updates. And does it use frames, or does your site use Flash? These are other considerations you have to take into account. Frames, if you're using frames and you tagged every frame, you may get multiple page calls for each page that people view. So you have to take that into account. So your next step would be to create a Google account, and if you already have that, then just log into Google Analytics and create a Google Analytics account. You can access Google Analytics at google.com/analytics. Click in the top right corner there at Access Analytics, and you'll be able to log in. Once logged in, it'll walk you through some initial steps about your website, such as the domain name and things like that. Once you've got your account, you will log in, and let me just show you an example here. And you'd be able to see the initial overview page. Now, this is the Google Store. So once you're logged in, you get to see your initial page here, and you will have one profile automatically created. We recommend, if you have a single site you're tracking, a set of profiles. And so we have 4 of them listed here. We recommend a master profile. This is the profile that you'll use for all of your analysis and reporting, and is on the production site. We recommend a test profile. What you use this for is Google has a lot of filters and goals that you can set up. You want to set up your filters and goals on the test profile first. Let them run for a little period of time to make sure that it does not disrupt your data before then moving those to your master profile. We also recommend you have a raw profile. Raw profile means that there are no filters here, and this means everything gets pulled in. So as a last resort, this can be used as a backup for your data, or maybe you have a filter that is pulling out some of your query parameters and other things that are in your URL or other places, and you sometimes need to go and refer to that data. The raw will have that. And then a dev profile. This is just for your dev or staging server, where you can test some of your analytic changes before you launch them to your production site. Google by default allows up to 50 profiles per account out of the box, so you've got quite a bit of room for tracking sites. But if you do have a larger number, there are ways that you could get that increased to 100 or even 200. Particularly if you are an AdWords customer as well. So once you've got your profile set up and ready to go, we want to log in, and one of the first things we do on our master profile is we like to log in and create what we call an internal traffic filter. And how you do that is going here. These are just some sample profiles we use on BKI for event tracking. When you log in and you see your profile, you can click Edit on the far right side here. This takes you to your profile settings screen, and you can scroll down to your filters. And we like to, on the master profile, which is your production profile, we like to exclude our local office traffic. We're visiting our website quite a bit, and we don't want that actually tracked within our analytics to skew some of our data. So we add in a profile or a filter that's excluding our BKI traffic at our local office. So if you have a dedicated IP address in your office, then you may consider actually excluding that data, or even creating a separate profile that just includes your office data. That way you can separate the two, and you can see how much of your traffic is coming from your actual office versus external visitors. And here's an example of how you'd create the filter. We've got the filter name that you put in, exclude office traffic. Then you're going to filter type as exclude all traffic from an IP address. And then you'll enter the IP address below. What you might notice here is because this does use regular expression, there is a backslash right before the period, and that helps to escape the period, which does have meaning in regular expression. It's not required, but it does just help to ensure that your the IP address you enter is going to be identified correctly. Once we've got the internal traffic filter on our master profile, we'll then move to adding the tracking code to our website. Now, to retrieve the tracking code, you can go to the same profile settings screen. When you do sign up for a profile, it'll be given to you right away, but if you're not ready to do it right then, you can continue doing the configurations we've just discussed, and you can come back to your profile settings screen here, and at the very top, you can click the check status, and this will take you to the page where you can retrieve your code that will go on your website. Now, one of the things that I've shown here that we tend to change on every site that we implement that helps eliminate problems down the road is we do add in the domain, the root domain for that site. And the way that you can do this easily within the tracking code setup is where it's asking you what to track. Even if you're tracking a single domain, choose the one domain with multiple subdomains. And you'll see that here it adds a line of code that is related to your domain. And what this helps to do is that there may be areas of your site you're unaware of that have subdomains, or if your site later or in the future adds subdomains, or users can access your site on both BKI Studio on domain.com and www.domain.com. This will ensure that the cookies are all set consistently, and you'll get consistent tracking across all these variations. Otherwise, the base tracking code should work good for the majority of your needs. There are special considerations for cross-domain as well, and I'll show you where you can find information on that as we get to the end near the resources section. Your next step is if you do have AdWords, you want to link that account to your Google Analytics account. Now, before you go and log into AdWords and do that, you have to make sure that your AdWords account administrator is also an administrator on your Google Analytics account. And to manage users, when you're in your account, when you log into the main screen that shows your list of profiles, at the bottom of that screen you'll see a user manager page. And on that page you can go and add new users. And basically all you need to do is add your the email for your Google account that is your administrator on AdWords as an account administrator on your Google Analytics account. Once you've got that done, then you want to log into your AdWords, go to the Reporting and Tools menu and click on Google Analytics, and then you'll then be walked through the process to link the account. It'll ask you to either create a new Google Analytics account or link to an existing account. If you've already created your Google Analytics account, then you're going to link it. And the next page will then ask if you have access to multiple Google Analytics accounts. It will ask what account you want to link to. And one option to make sure that you do check is the destination URL auto-tagging. And what this means is that by clicking this, AdWords will automatically campaign tag all of your links, which will allow Google Analytics to link that up with your AdWords data and do the imports properly. If you don't click this, you will then have to manually tag all of your AdWords links that are driving traffic to your website. And so manually campaign tagging, if you have a lot of AdWords listings, that's going to take a lot of work. Step 8, goals and funnels. So as we discussed up front, you want to have the business objectives and goals for the site. And what are those? An e-commerce site, well, there's checkout, but maybe there's also, like here, there's a contact form, or there's a newsletter sign-up, or a variety of other areas. Now, goals can be configured in 3 different ways, and so let me just jump to the settings for those. So Google allows you to create 4 goal sets, and in each of those sets there are 5 goals. So that gives you a total of 20 goals that you can configure in Google Analytics. As I mentioned, there's 3 types of goals, and this would be a URL destination. So in Google Analytics, it's recording the URL that shows up here, and to report a goal, you could use the URL destination. You could have what we would call an engagement goal of time on site, or an engagement goal of pages per visit. Now these are good default goals, but for most sites you should also have some other specific goals related to your site. So time on site, pages per visit are interesting things to track, but you should also have other things that people are doing on your site most likely, rather than just those 2. Even if you're a content-specific site, can people comment on that content? Can they post new content themselves? Things like that you want to actually track those as possible goal completion. So you'll start by entering a goal name, making the goal active, choosing the position that you want that goal to appear, so which set. So with 4 sets, you could break them out into a logical breakdown, if you like. Maybe some are related to e-commerce, and some are related to lead generation and things like that, if you have multiple goal types on your site. Or maybe there's engagement goals, like we talked about, versus other types of goals. Choose the goal type, and in this one, with time on site and pages per visit, they're relatively straightforward in how you would configure those, so I'm going to focus mostly on URL destination here. Head match is your default, and that is the easiest to set up. Basically what that means is you need to have part of the page entered up here. So you don't have to enter the whole URL string with the domain. You just start at the slash after the end of your domain and enter the page. So maybe as it's indicated here, you would have, contact thanks.html. Now with a head match, what this means is that You could have other variables that appear here and change over time. So with question mark and A, B, C equals 1, etc., etc. If you have just .html with a head match, it will include all of those as matches for contactbank.html. So it does make it easy to track those pages without having to worry about any specifics and missing things. Exact match, so that would mean it has to exactly match what we have here. And regular expression match, I'm not going to get into regular expressions right now, but this could allow you to create goals that are made up of multiple pages and a variety of other things on how you can match that data. It's a popular way to do this type of matching and is available in Google Analytics both for filters and goals. So if it's something that you're interested in or you have a complex implementation, regular expressions are something to look into. You can match it on case sensitivity, and a goal value can be set. So goal value is optional, but it is nice to have, even if your site is not e-commerce related, maybe it's lead generation, but you could assign a value to leads that come through your website. So for every 10 leads, I do $1,000 in business. So maybe every lead is worth $100, and you could enter that value here. Goals can have up to 10 funnel steps. What that means is sort of where do people start before they get to the final goal. So as a checkout, you may have the shopping cart, then you have a login or account creation page, you have your shipping information, you then have the payment page, and then as a goal, you have your thank you page. And you can configure all of that in a funnel. And so as you go through, let me just show you an example of what a funnel would look like in Google Analytics. So for example, as I just gave an example with a store, in the Google store, they have a funnel that starts on the product page. And one of where the funnel is really shown is through the funnel visualization report. And what this shows you is how many people start out viewing product category, and shows you where these people entered, and if they didn't go any further in that funnel, where they went if they exited, what % of people proceeded to the next step in the funnel. There's then a view product page. You can see nobody entered, nobody left there. There's view shopping cart. So some people actually were able to enter directly into the shopping cart. Now that could be from a third site, it could be some tests. There's a variety of different things that could come from. It's not a standard product category page. Some people got to the shopping cart and left, but 57% of them proceeded to the login page. Out of that, 42% of them proceeded to the next. And what you can use this funnel for is if you do see a huge number of exits on a certain step in your process, you may go look at that page and say, why? Why are people leaving there? So the funnel can become very valuable in helping to identify problem spots as well as success spots on your site when people are trying to complete certain objectives. So you get to the final step, and overall they had 536 people, starting with 169,000. Now, this funnel may be a little too far back, and maybe you might have started it at the shopping cart. So out of 5,000 people that hit the shopping cart, 536 converted. So that's not too bad. That's over 10%. But if you look at it the way they have theirs set up, this funnel conversion rate is 0.32%. So once we've set up goals and funnels and we've identified those, if your site has e-commerce, you want to look at configuring e-commerce tracking. And so this as well is done through the settings. In your profile settings, under the main website profile information, you'd click Edit. And in here, you'll have the e-commerce section. So you'd want to enable that. Once this is enabled, and make sure the currency displayed is correct for you. Once this is enabled, you then have to make sure that you do go and tag your site with the thank you page e-commerce tracking code. I've included a link here to all the details about the tracking code. There's two parts of it, one for the transaction and one for each product that is being submitted. And so for every time someone hits your thank you page, that can be configured to send out the e-commerce tracking. You'd also likely, as I mentioned previously, set a goal for that thank you page. So you get two different types of reports that are available related to e-commerce and related to goals. Now, if your site has an internal search, so people can search through your site, you want to also enable site search tracking. That is also in the same section. So underneath e-commerce, you'll see that there's site search. You can click the site search, and how that data is collected is many sites, when you do a search, it'll append the search term into the URL, so such as Q equals and your search term. What you would then do is say, well, what is the parameter that is being used? And maybe it's search. And Google will then look in your URLs for that URL parameter called search, and it will grab out the text that is set as that value. And it will then include that into your search reports. We like to, the majority of the time, unless there's specific requirements, we will strip these out. The reason being is that if you don't strip these out, every search term will result in a unique page name in your reporting, and it makes it really hard to see how many people, if searches throughout your site and results pages are in different places, it really can add to the data that you have. And if you don't need it, we like to just strip it out. But certain requirements that you may have may want you to keep that. And this is where you can use your test profile or your dev profiles that we talked about earlier and try out search, see how the reports show up, and decide how you'd like to move forward with that. If your site also uses categories, maybe I can search products, articles, other various things. You can also track what categories people are searching. And again, it uses a query parameter that you can enter in here. So once we've done that, we want to look at doing our campaign tagging. And this is really important. A lot of people get their analytics set up, and they're going out and they're doing all kinds of advertising, whether it's through emails and banners and all this stuff. And you know what? They're not tracking it. The place where you're advertising may give you open rates through emails. It may give you clicks on your banners. But if you don't track those through to your website and the actions that people are performing on your website, you can't actually measure the ROI of the spend that you've done on that advertising. So everything that is done off-site for your advertising, anything that drives traffic to your site, you want to make sure you campaign tag. So there's 5 primary tags that you use. UTM campaign, this is the campaign name. So maybe you have a spring sale campaign and it's got all kinds of other specifics related to it. UTM medium, so this would be email, banner, whatever other medium you're using to drive traffic to your site. UTM source is where are those people coming from. So it could be, if it's a banner, maybe it's the actual site name. If it's an email, maybe it's the name of the email that's going out, such as this one, which is June newsletter. UTM content. So this is the content that is of the link. So if it's an email, as an example, the content may be a URL, or it may be the text that is hyperlinked. Something that indicates to you of where in that email did they click the link. And then UTM term is used for paid search. Really, that's about the only time it's used, so it could be used for other things, but it shows up under your keyword reporting. So UTM term will be used mostly for paid search, and that, if you're using MSN, then you'd want to use your campaign tag in there and tag by term. I've included some links below here that give you some more information about campaign tagging. And the bottom link is also a link to our campaign tagging worksheet. And what this is, it helps you keep track of all the tagging that you've done. So you can go through the worksheet, fill this out, fill out these variables up above, and it will automatically construct the link for you. And it's a great way to keep track of that. So you can download that as an Excel file from Google Docs and use it on your own. Again, this presentation will be available afterwards, so you'll be able to get that link. So something I talked about briefly at the start was creating and updating your privacy policy. This is something that a lot of people don't realize, but Google's terms and conditions do specify that you have to have a privacy policy and that the policy must indicate that the site uses a cookie to collect anonymous traffic data. I've never really heard Google enforcing this on companies, but it is something to be aware of and something that should be there anyway. By having a privacy policy on your website, you do build confidence for your customers and visitors. Step 13, so you've got the code on the site, you've done everything before, so now it's time to test. If possible, you always want to test on a development server. I know some people don't always have a dev server to test on, but whenever possible, test on your development or staging server first. Go through your website, make sure that the Google Analytics isn't causing any problems on your site to begin with. But then once you've navigated through the site, you've performed some scenarios such as if you're e-commerce, do a checkout or sign up for your newsletter and do these various things. Then go into your test profile in your Google Analytics and take a look and make sure that the goals are registering, that the e-commerce tracking is working, and all those various things. And other things you can look at, you can use various tools to help you with that. So one great one that a lot of people use is a tool called WASP. That's put out by iPerception. There is a free version and also a paid version. And that's a Firefox plugin that will show you, for every page that you go to on your site, it can show you all the variables that are getting sent off to Google, and it's broken down. So you can see the page name, the domain. You can see down to the cookies. So are the cookies staying the same as far as identifying who I am? If your cookies are changing throughout your visit, it may be that if certain cookies are changing throughout your visit, there may be problems with your domains not being the same. Step 14, so we want to set up some filters and advanced segments. So filters are a way to filter data during the import of the data. So once data is filtered, you can never get that data back to the pre-filtered in that profile. Whereas advanced segments are doing segmentation on data that is within your profile. So you can take a chunk of data, apply a segment, and see those updates afterwards. There are two different ways of segmenting your data, and they both have specific uses. You may use filters for having a website that has multiple languages, and you can create profiles then that just have the data for a certain language. So when setting up filters, we have sort of three standard ones that we recommend for all clients at the minimum. And so the first one is excluding your office traffic, which we discussed previously. And that is taking out the traffic from your local office, if you have a static IP at your office, for people accessing your website. A lot of the time we don't want to track those people because they throw off our metrics. If we do want to track them, we'll track them in a separate profile. And you could do that by creating an include profile, an include filter in that separate profile that just includes data from your office. We also do an include filter for the domains that are under your website. And the reason for this is that you want to just make sure that I'm tracking the right data into that profile. So on the master profile that we would have in our VKI site, we have an include filter for star.vkistudios.com. That means track everything for all subdomains related to vkistudios.com into this account. And the reason we have that there is we want to make sure, one, that none of our development server data is getting into this profile, and two, that there are sites out there that tend to copy content off sites, and if they copy the content, including your Google Analytics code, their data they'll start sending data into your Google Analytics, and you don't necessarily want that. Another filter that we do like to use on most sites, but not necessarily every site if there's a business reason for it, is lowercase page names. And what this means is if somebody accesses a page on your website and they use different cases, each version of that case of the page name will show up as a separate entry in Google Analytics. And you need to sort of manually combine those to see the total page views for that page. So on Windows, where you can access with all these various cases, having lowercase page names ensures that all versions of that page are the same page. Linux and Unix-based systems could have the same name with different cases, and it could be a different file. But most of the time, people don't tend to do that. So this filter does help you just combine all that together, and instead of having it split out. Now, where you would create those filters, we did show that earlier, where under your profile setting, there is a filters section to your site. So you can see here we've got include the www.bkistudios.com, and that's an include filter with our filter pattern, which is down below. We have our exclude BKI traffic. This is excluding our local office traffic. I included the images in the slide, so you all have examples of how you could do these. And we've got lowercase page name. And so this takes the request URI, which is the page name, and automatically puts it to lowercase. So now you want to move things to your production site. Time to deploy, get things going. Upload all your pages. You want to visit your live site to ensure it continues to function normally. Log into Google Analytics, check that the live profile is receiving data. It can be, particularly when you first launch your site, can be up to 24 hours delay. But once processing starts, we're now starting to see that most data, you do start seeing data that has happened within about 4 hours. But keep in mind with Google Analytics that you normally want to be looking at the previous day's data or older than that. Because if you're looking at same-day data, not all of the data has been processed. So to ensure that data is 100% processed, we usually recommend going back 1 day. So for today, I'd be looking at March 1st instead of March 2nd and the previous days before that. But when you're just testing things and just saying, does data show up? Data should be starting to show up in about 4 hours. And again, on your live site, validate the site. So use tools such as WASP, which I mentioned before, and another tool is SiteScan GA. This is a basic scanning tool. It is free for a single site, and I believe up to about 1,000 or 10,000 pages. But it'll scan through your site, and if you've used the basic GA tracking code without any major customization, it'll detect what pages are tagged or not tagged, and it'll highlight any that it thinks might have issues. If you've done a lot of customization on your site as far as the tagging goes, SiteScan won't do that. There are paid tools that can help you with that. And let traffic, over time, you want to start reviewing and making sure everything's good. Once you start seeing the data, review your filters and goals, make sure you're getting the right data in there. If there's any updates you need to make because there's any tweaks, now's the time to do it. But make sure updates are tested first. So test them. If you have a dev site, test them there. If not, use your test profile and test your filters and goals there individually first, one at a time. Make one change, test it, make sure it's right, move it to your master. Make another change, test it, move it to your master. Don't do a whole bunch of changes at once and test them. If you do that, then you're going to have trouble identifying where a problem might have occurred. Now that you've got the data, everything's up there, it's time to grant access to your users. And highly recommend that if you're giving access to people that, unless it's mandatory that you give these people admin access, only give them view report access. This ensures that they can't get in and change goals or filters that could mess with your data. And as well, for some of these key stakeholders, set up some scheduled reports for them, because just because you've got analytics does not mean people are going to use it. So to schedule reports, you can go to almost any report in the site, and you can click the email tab. And from here, you can email that report once, or you could set up a schedule. The one thing to consider with your scheduling is based on what time range you choose, the report range will be within that time. So if I chose weekly sent each Monday, I'll get a report that shows my previous week's data, just a week. And if I say monthly, sent on the first day of each month, I'll get the previous month's data. There's not a way to have it come out, say, daily or weekly with monthly data or quarterly data. There are tools through that people have created through the APIs that may help with this, and I'll show you where you can find that. But these, you can send the data in CSV, TSV, CSV, XML. We recommend for, if you're sending it to people that aren't too familiar with things, send them the PDF. It has all the images and everything. It looks almost exactly the same as your report that you see right here. So for executives, it's nice. They can just see it. There's my numbers. I get the visualizations as well, versus sending me an Excel file that is just a bunch of numbers. Some tools and resources. So there's our blog. We do a lot of posts there related to Google Analytics, both from the technical side and the reporting side. There's the Google Analytics help site. This is accessed right within Google Analytics. So down on the up on the top, you've got your help right up here. Don't hesitate to use that. It's a valuable thing if you have questions. It's also on your summary page. Right down, there's a whole resources section right here. So the help is a great starting point if you're having specific problems. It will also guide you towards the forums as well. There's the Google Code site. Now this is where you might find specifics related to implementing on your site. It will help you with Flash implementations, cross-domain tracking, all kinds of other things that are related to your implementation with Google Analytics. It also will link you to the API if you're interested in learning about how to pull data into some custom reporting. There's the Flash API site. You can access this from the code site, but this is also the direct access for it. Keep in mind the API does not always have the same, it's not always 100% up to date with all the features that is in the standard JavaScript that Google uses. So there is a page there that tells you what has been implemented and what hasn't. So make sure it works the way you want before you start using it. Some good books. So Avinash Kaushik, one of the leaders in the industry, he's written a couple books. One of his most recent is Web Analytics 2.0. This is a great book to start out and learning about web analytics and the things you can do and the data you can grab. Definitely recommend it as a good read. Brian Clifton, he's another Google Analytics consultant. Advanced Web Metrics with Google Analytics by Brian Clifton, another great book. And this one's a little older, but Jason Burby and Shane Atchison, Using Data to Make Smart Business Decisions. Related to some tools, so WASP, as I already mentioned, a great place to go and actually look at tools is the Analytics App Gallery. And so this app gallery, I've linked you directly to the actual site audit section right now. But there's a whole gallery that you can get all kinds of different areas. So here's WASP. We'll give you some information on how to get to it. There's SiteScan. But there's all kinds of tools related to different things that can help you with your tracking, reporting, integrations with other tools. A lot of tools now are building in integrations with Google Analytics through their API. So I highly recommend that once you get Google Analytics implemented, you're using the reporting, you start looking at this section for ways to expand on your implementation. So it looks like we've about hit the time, so it's 10:45. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. We're going to have about 15 minutes or so where we'll answer questions. So feel free to chime in and answer questions, and Kent will throw them my way.
So if you have any questions, there's a big one right off the top. So Goran has a question. He asks, greets from Belgrade, Serbia. I have one a bit more advanced question. Is it possible to track e-commerce translations if the last step in the checkout process, before the thank you page is shown, is performed on a third-party domain on which you can't place Google Analytics tracking? So the question, I suppose, is, if your thank you page is outside of your control, is there still a way to track it?
So if the thank you page itself is out of control, it can be challenging to track. Now, for sites such as PayPal, as an example, where if you're using PayPal for your purchases, a lot of the ways that it's implemented is people will fill their shopping cart, they'll shop on your site, and when they go to checkout, they're directed to PayPal to complete the transaction. And then upon completing the transaction, they are redirected back to a thank you page on your site. For PayPal, they'll post back the transaction information to that thank you page, and you can capture it and then submit that as the e-commerce tracking. If the transaction occurs and completes on the third-party site and you aren't able to actually submit the data, it gets a little more challenging, but there are ways that you might be able to match it up using third-party tools. Ultimately, what you really definitely want to do is track as much of that checkout process as you can up until they leave your site. And from then, you can match that up with the actual completions of transactions. So you can see how many people got to that last step. And from then, you can see how many people from the payment processor's data completed the transaction. Hopefully that helps to see how many are actually getting lost within that payment processor's checkout process. Hope that helps answer your questions, Lauren. If not, feel free to send us a comment or send us some more further outline on that after the presentation. I'd be happy to follow up with you.
So our next question, how can we track display media in Google Analytics?
Display media, so that's where you're displaying. Now, if you're talking about online display such as banner ads and things like that, that's where you'll use the campaign tracking. So we jump back right here. So campaign tracking, this is where you want to make sure everything that you're doing to drive traffic to your site is campaign tagged. If you're talking about display that's on your website, such as banners that you are advertising with, Google does have custom variables, and those would make a great way to track those. So within the custom variable, you could submit, when somebody clicks, you can use a sort of URL or some type of code to track it, and you could submit the name of the banner or where it is, and you could start building that up. If you're talking about offline, there's a variety of ways to track that. One of them would be to use vanity URL. So if you have a big billboard where you're doing advertising, you could use a vanity URL that points people at your site. And when they land, it does a redirect to the main domain that actually appends the campaign tracking variable. And so then you'll know that everybody who came from seeing those billboards with that ad. I covered sort of multiple bases there, so I hope one of them helped answer the question.
Any more questions from anyone? Oh, if a web surfer clicks on an AdWords ad, how can I find out what that surfer actually exactly typed into Google?
So the reports, I believe, the Google Analytics reports now have, if you've connected your AdWords with your Google Analytics, it will show you the bid term, but it will also show you the search term in your report. So Google has a way of, I have a available one open here with AdWords connected. Just let me check for you, and I can maybe show you an example if we've got that. So the keywords here are bid keywords, but you can also show, by using secondary dimensions or even just changing the primary dimension, you can actually look at the actual search query that was matched originally. So the keywords are the what's being used to reach your site, as you can see, or here's the matched query. So you can change back and forth between the type of terms that you're actually seeing people use to reach your site, whether it's what you're specifically bidding on or what people typed into the search bar. So these secondary dimensions right here from the reporting side, they can be quite powerful on how you can break down your data. You could even use them both at the same time. So I could have keyword on one side and the match term on the other to see how those actually match up. So, Google Shirts is actually Google T-shirts. Google Shirts, Google Merchandise. So you can see how here's what I'm bidding on the left, and here's what people are typing in on the right. Any other questions?
Do we have any more? Is it correct that in the past this could only be done with a filter?
Yes. I believe it was about the early to mid last year when this secondary dimension was released. Previously, you did have to use a filter to pull that data in. So, and you usually wanted to do this in a different profile so that you didn't overwrite the other data. So you could then have one profile that has sort of the actual search terms and one profile that had the terms you're bidding on.
Anyone else? All right, I think we're done. I want to close this off by reminding you all that we have another webinar coming up at the end of next month, or actually at the end of this month, Selling Through Search, SEO for E-Commerce. You can find that under bkistudios.com/webinars. Until then, I'll bid you all goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.